Hello, and welcome to Global History 10 World History. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the underlying causes of World War I. These are the causes that, when they all came together, are essentially the reason why World War I is going to ignite into the firing massive destruction that's going to engulf Europe for 4 years. What is important to know is that World War I is going to be seen as the beginning of the 20th century. All the events that start taking place in the 1800s even continue on into the early 1900s. So to assume that the 20th century begins in January 1st, 1900 would be a bit of a misaccurate statement. So to begin, we're just going to take a look at Europe in pre-1914. Europe at this time, each of these nations is a world power. They each dominate a good chunk of the world. Each of them could be seen as an empire. For instance, we have Great Britain right here. Great Britain controls many of the colonies around the world. There's a saying at the time period, the sun never sets on Britain. Then we have the French. French are another country, or rather empire, that's going to have territories and colonies around the world. Germany is going to start having colonies around Africa. Austria-Hungary is another great power. Russia is another power. Even the Ottoman Empire. Belgium. Each of these are going to be a world power. They can compete in the world stage, and they're going to command a lot of influence in any type of global affair. Naturally, with any type of great power, there's always going to be one that's going to strive to become the best. And this is where you'll start seeing some of the initial causes of World War I, which we'll be taking a look at in a second. So here we have some of the underlying causes. We'll be taking a look at them later on, but rather this is just a little bit of an introduction to them. First we have militarism. This is a glorification of the military. Many of the nations, Germany and England for instance, are going to compete to build up their armed forces and their military to show who's the most powerful. Alliances are another part. Alliances are agreements to help one another out in times of war. Many of these European powers are going to make alliances and deals with one another to assist one another in case as a battle breaks out or if a nation gets into trouble. Imperialism. Imperialism is a policy where one country seeks to dominate lesser ones politically, economically, and socially. As we saw before, most of those European powers are going to get a lot of their resources from their colonies throughout Africa and Asia. And lastly, nationalism. Nationalism is the belief that one should be loyal to a country due to similar cultural or history. All these nations have one thing in common. They have a strong nationalistic tendency. They all believe that their country should be for their group of people. For instance, Great Britain for the British, France for the French, Germany for the Germans, and so forth. This all comes out of the 1800s, where they were finally able to establish their own borders. Great Britain had them beforehand due to being an island nation, but it's really in the 1800s when the rest of Europe is able to catch up and essentially create their own national identity. Now, it is important to note that while all of these issues can be on their own would be able to cause a war, they essentially are the fuel, not the spark. On their own, each one, okay, nations are guilty of them and they can cause problems, but it's only when they come together that they can cause that perfect storm. It's like the best way to describe it is like a fire. If you only have, say, wood, you're not going to be able to start a fire. Rather, you need all the elements together, and those four are all the elements that come together. All they're waiting for is that spark. So if we take a look right here, we have the Triple Alliance and the Entente. These are two of the major alliance groups that were formed prior to World War I. Colonial rivalry in Alsace-Lorraine. These are territorial competitions in various empires competing for territories overseas. We have Pan-Slavism. That was a nationalistic belief held by the Slavic people. And we see Bosnia, Syria, Balkan Wars. These are all militarism and nationalism where the nations are working together to dominate the Balkan area. Balkans essentially are going to become the fuel for World War I to begin. And like I said, in this case, all the conditions were perfect because you had your fuel and all you were waiting for is a spark. We'll be taking a look later on we'll be taking a little more of an in-depth look at all these causes of World War I.